Bruce Wayne, Batman Beyond. How can Bruce Wayne betray himself? Well, unless we're speaking in a philosophical or psychological way, he can't. That's why this point is talking about Batman Beyond, which is Terry McGinnis. In Batman Beyond issues 31, 32, and 33, after visiting Arkham Asylum, Bruce Wayne begins to act rather strangely. He begins drinking at odd times, he doesn't seem to care when Terry is on the verge of death, with Terry's brother having to step in to save him, and he seems to go gambling and brags about his money a lot too, which is kinda strange. Most shocking of all though, he shoots at Terry when he's confronted and tackles him off a ledge. It turns out, it isn't actually Bruce Wayne. It's actually a doppelganger villain named Falseface, so it's all good. And I'm sure none of you are surprised. Jezebel Jet. In the Batman R.I.P. comic, the group known as the Black Glove started working in Gotham, and Bruce Wayne immediately smelt foul play. At a point during this conflict, his love interest at the time, Jezebel Jet, was revealed to be a double agent. Jezebel and the Black Glove even buried Batman alive. But Batman is one guy whose heart you don't want to mess with. He rises from the grave, revealing he was merely pretending to be in love with her too. Then he reveals her whole backstory, which he seemed to already know. She then left, vowing to get revenge on Bats, which seems a little backwards to me, before being killed by Talia al Ghul. The Crimson Knight. Richard Lyons was a character that appeared in Detective Comics number 271. He was also known by the name Crimson Knight, and was a vigilante in Gotham, gaining the trust of the GCPD as well as the heroic duo of Batman and Robin. Being the good guys though, they had a sneaking suspicion he may not have been on the up and up, and after confronting him after he tried to steal some valuables, it was revealed that he was actually Crime Lord Lyons. And he was promptly captured, and his career as both a hero and a villain were both ended. The Cavalier. The Cavalier was a swashbuckling, sword-wielding hero who first appeared in Legends of the Dark Knight number 32. Batman was a big fan of the Cavalier actually. He had such a positive outlook when fighting crime, and he was a man of gallantry and honor, and he reminded Bruce Wayne of his childhood, being very similar to Zorro, who Bruce Wayne was a fan of. Sadly, the Cavalier let Batman down when he started resorting to a life of crime when he realized just how much easier it was compared to fighting crime. So he's not so honorable after all, it seems. The Justice League. There are actually multiple storylines involved here. Basically, in the Tower of Babel story, it's revealed that Batman has contingencies for every member of the Justice League in case anything were to go sour. When Ra's al Ghul gets his hands on these plans though, he uses them against the Justice League. Now, Batman is able to defeat Ra's, but it causes the entire Justice League to lose a bit of trust in Batman. I just want to pause to say, this is kind of dumb. He's Batman. You think he wouldn't have a plan for scenarios like that? But hey, conflict sells. Either way, after the Joker ends up hitting the core members of the Justice League with Joker Toxin in the Endgame storyline, they all turn on Batman, leading to a completely awesome moment where he takes them all on and comes out on top. Yeah, they were not in their right minds, but their actions were slightly fueled by the distrust caused by the event of the Tower of Babel. Catwoman, Dark Knight Rises. Now, if you haven't seen Dark Knight Rises yet, well then you clearly wouldn't care if I spoil a tiny little plot point. Batman makes a deal with Selina Kyle to give her a program called the Clean Slate that will eliminate her criminal past in exchange for her leading him to Bane. To be fair, she does lead Batman to the villain, only it's a trap and Bane beats the ever-living heck out of Bruce, breaking his back. She did it to save her own skin, but I just feel like if she put a little bit more faith in Bruce, maybe the movie would have ended way earlier. But I like how the rest of the story goes, so a betrayal that ultimately wasn't so bad, right? Hey guys, before we carry on, I just want to quickly shout out the top 10 nerd presence on Facebook. Check us out there, and also, if you are enjoying the video, smack that like and subscribe button, it really helps us out. Thanks for all the support guys, it means a lot. Flashpoint Batman. When the Flashpoint universe was created, it changed a lot of characters. Possibly one of the most interesting ones though, was Batman, who in this universe is actually Thomas Wayne, with Bruce being killed instead, and Martha Wayne becoming the Joker. It's twisted and cool, and this Batman has a different moral code. Killing criminals. When he finds out that mainline Bruce Wayne becomes the Batman, he deems this unacceptable and tries to change his son's ways. Instead of being, I don't know, a good father though, he teams up with Bane to break Bruce. Things get out of hand in the City of Bane event, which actually ended up with Thomas killing Alfred Pennyworth, which broke everyone. He very clearly regretted his actions, but I don't know, man, you ain't coming back from that one. Not for me, sorry, you're done. Superman Dark Knights of Steel. I heavily regret not talking about this when we covered the top 10 new DC universes. Dark Knights of Steel takes place in a medieval fantasy version of the DC universe. It's super cool. The Wayne family used to rule over the land until Jor-El lands on Earth after escaping Krypton, and they easily take over. Bruce and Kal-El are actually unknowing brothers, with Bruce being Jor-El's half-son. After a whole bunch of stuff happens that I won't tell you because you should read it, Bruce reveals the truth of his parentage to Kal, who stabs him in the chest with a shard of kryptonite. He then flies him up into the sky and throws him into the ground. Now, we don't know yet how the story is going to go from here on, or I don't know, but it definitely surprised me and I wanted you to all know so we can all follow along together. Ghostmaker. The Ghostmaker and Batman actually go back a long time, having met when they were both training to become vigilantes. They were easily friends. But the difference between the two lay deeply in their core values and motivations. The motivation of Bruce's parents' death didn't sit well with Ghostmaker, and actually caused them to fall out. The Ghostmaker saw crime fighting as an art rather than a duty, and he lacked a sense of empathy that brought Bruce to classify him as a psychopath. They fought multiple different times and ultimately agreed that the Ghostmaker will stay far out of Gotham. That is, until Joker War, when he invaded Gotham, incapacitating Batman and the Bat family plus some other heroes, and he tries to save Gotham. Yeah, that makes sense. DC versus vampires. Alright, this one is hot off the presses. This year we got the DC versus vampires storyline that I didn't even know about it until making this video. Basically, the vampires are building themselves up to take on the world, turning many superheroes and supervillains into vampires. There's a mystery, however, surrounding who exactly the hero leader of the vampires could be. After testing all the members of the Bat family, it's determined that none of them are vampires, so at least he has that. After some intense detective work and a whole lot of other stuff that I don't want to spoil, the leader of the vampire army is finally revealed. Spoiler warning, okay? If you want to read this, turn off the video now. Okay? It's frickin' Nightwing! Revealed as he plunges his fist straight through an unaware Batman's chest nonetheless. What? He had been consuming the blood of Starfire, which has the unique ability to make vampires immune to their natural weaknesses. I'm gonna be staying tuned on how the story progresses, but Vampire Nightwing? Oh yes. Oh yes.
Number 10, Iron Man 2099. One of the Iron Man 2099s anyways. This one comes from the 2099 future of the Iron Man Armored Adventure series. Here 2099 Iron Man is a hero named Andros Stark, who is also Tony Stark's grandson, but becomes an antagonist in the series. All because he travels back in time to defeat his grandfather, Tony Stark. However, this is because Andros believes Tony is to blame for creating the AI menace known as Vortex in his time. He attempts to kill Tony and the Avengers, but later realizes when they aim to use a virus to defeat him that this nanotech virus is actually Vortex, and that Vortex therefore only existed in true timey-wimey paradoxical fashion because it was created to defeat him, Iron Man 2099. In other words, Andros and his attempt to stop Vortex was also the cause of Vortex's existence. Man, what a time travel story. I feel like time travel and Tony Stark go together just like bread and butter. This is just always a thing that happens. Number 9, Iron Lad. Iron Lad probably didn't mean to betray Iron Man back when he was known as Iron Lad, but the reality is he was destined to do so. This is because Iron Lad goes on to become the famous Avengers villain Kang the Conqueror, along the way also becoming Immortus and using his power to, at that time, manipulate and influence Iron Man, to get him to do his bidding, to help him direct events in a certain way. Kang/Immortus are generally all about manipulating the timeline so that they can achieve their own goals in the future. They're like, I'm gonna set everything in motion, then I'm gonna go to the future, and then like everything will be great for me Kang, or for me Immortus. And unfortunately, Immortus's machinations this time around caused Iron Man to be pulled into his plot, and eventually turned into Immortus's own sleeper agent, making Iron Man turn on his friends and then become a villain. Boo. And like I said, Kang and Immortus are technically Iron Lad, so technically a hero, at least to start with. And friends, before I move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more betrayal lists, be sure to let us know who you want to hear about getting betrayed next. So many people have been betrayed, so many people. Number 8, Hulk. I personally kind of think Hulk was actually kind of justified in this one, but you could consider it betrayal just based on the fact that Tony was, pretty much just trying to apologize and atone for his past, and Hulk wanted, well, pretty much wanted none of it. This spun out of Original Sin when it was revealed that an inebriated Tony, back when he was an alcoholic, was responsible for an accident in essence that transformed Bruce Banner and created Hulk. He had tampered with the Gamma Bomb and had also pushed for more deadly weaponry against Bruce's wishes. However, the version of Tony that we had in the present day had been mentally reset, so despite being post-Superior Iron Man here, he was back to being a good guy and basically just felt awful about this whole thing and about all of the bad stuff he'd done in the past. But despite this, Hulk still wanted to end his life and was unwilling to talk it out, which, isn't really fair considering that Tony was like, look, I know I messed up, but can we just be friends? Aw, poor Tony. Everyone always wants to kill him. It's a rough go. Number 7, Ant-Man. Hank Pym has done a few things to portray a good amount of the Avengers, but this time around, we're actually talking about a version of him that merged with Ultron. I think it's called Ultron Pym is what we usually call this version of Ultron, fun fact. I'm calling it Ant-Man though because it's a heroes list, but Ultron Pym I think is the general name. Hank and Ultron had united to become one being, which ended up messing them both up, as you'd imagine, in Ultron Agenda. Tony at the time was dating Janet Van Dyne, and Ultron Hank, or Ultron Pym, did not like this. His plan was to fix the world by turning everyone on it into a sort of organic and AI merged being, and wanted Janet to basically merge with Jocasta and act as his partner and in essence part organic, part AI, robo-esque bride. Because Tony was with her, this pretty much infuriated him, and so the two faced off, with Ultron Hank trying to kill Tony because of his relationship with the Wasp. What a weird story. So many weird stories. Number 6, Eric Killmonger. Eric Killmonger isn't really so much a hero in the main continuity, and in the end, he didn't end up being so much a hero in this reality either, but he did pose as one for a good amount of time and was a member of the Guardians of the Universe. Although he did try to betray them as well, having his own objectives. So, important to note. Killmonger became Iron Man's right-hand man in the Disney Plus streaming series What If, in the episode titled What If Killmonger Rescued Tony Stark? What would have happened? Well, Killmonger would have pretended to be a friend to Tony Stark only to later betray him and kill him in cold blood. 1, because he pretty much hated everything that Tony represented, but 2, because Tony's death was kind of all part of a plot to try and provoke a war between the US and Wakanda so that he himself could defect to the side of Wakanda and thereby take over the nation from within, using Stark's technology to win Wakanda's favor when he helps them to defeat the US. It's a pretty bad betrayal though. It's pretty tragic. I was like, man, wow, that's crazy. That whole episode was crazy. I hope we get to see more of it. Number 5, Iron Man 2020. Iron Man 2020 is Arno Stark's Iron Man. In the comics he just went by Iron Man, but editorial wise he was referred to as Iron Man 2020, just to make it more clear that this isn't Tony Stark Iron Man, and also because that was actually the name of the series that he was a part of. Arno Stark, by the way, is Tony's brother and was the natural born son of Maria and Howard Stark, whereas it was revealed that Tony himself was adopted. Arno was hidden away for his own protection and also was not able to roam freely in the world due to him being born requiring medical assistance to breathe. In the end, Tony would learn the truth of his being adopted and about the existence of his brother. The two would team up for a time, but when Arno took up the mantle of Iron Man and combated against an AI rebellion, in the end he believed the best way to protect humanity was to control all the AI and the humans with his submission code. But when he asked his brother Tony to join him, Tony saw that Arno pretty much needed to be stopped, as he'd become a danger to the world and its free will. I just feel bad for Arno, man. Can we bring Arno back yet? Is Arno doing anything right now? I don't think Arno is doing anything. I feel like he's still in his bubble. Still in his bubble, and I think he's like going to die soon, which is why we're keeping him in a bubble. Number 4, Captain America. Captain America had his reasons, and honestly, I was on his side of the war. But the amazing thing about Civil War I was that the two sides each had their own seemingly justifiable motivations for their actions. So although I was on Cap's side, I could understand how fans on Tony's side would see Cap as a traitor of Iron Man instead of the other way around. Iron Man was fighting on the side of the Superhuman Registration Act, believing that making superhumans register so they could be monitored and deployed, working within government oversight for the safety of civilians, was the better way to go. Captain America was against the SRA, which put these two at odds, and which Iron Man and fans of Iron Man would likely consider to be a betrayal, considering that Tony thought he knew the better way to protect people. In the end, I would say it turned out that Cap was right, but you know, we each have our own sides of that argument that we believe in. Number 3, Iron Man. That's right, Iron Man betrayed Iron Man. Are you surprised? It's already happened twice on this list. It's gonna happen again. In fact, that happens kind of multiple times in the comics and in narratives. It is kind of a thing that I feel like comes up more than once. This time though, we are focusing on The Crossing, when Immortus turned Iron Man into a sleeper agent and villain, which we talked about a little bit earlier on the list. A young Iron Man was then brought to the present day to fight against his older version, and you could say there was some betrayal on both sides here. Older OG Iron Man had betrayed his younger self and his own ideals by allowing himself to become a pawn of Immortus, though admittedly it wasn't really his fault, and younger Iron Man fought against older evil Iron Man, which was likely considered a betrayal in his eyes, because you know, he's got his younger self fighting him. He's like, that's not cool, man. At least until older Iron Man almost killed his younger self, and then he ended up being redeemed in the end, sacrificing himself inevitably to save everyone else, and allowing the younger Tony to remain in the present day and take over for his older self. Oh, The Crossing. What a weird time you were. Even more odd, later down the line, these two Iron Men would actually be merged together, becoming the real Iron Man instead of two different versions of the character. And now we have Reset Iron Man, there's like stuff that he doesn't even remember from the past. Iron Man's had a weird continuity. Number 2, Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel and Iron Man used to be super close, but then Civil War II happened. They are over the events of Civil War II now in present day, but boy did this initially muck up their friendship. After the success of Civil War I, Marvel thought a second Civil War was in order, but this time the motives behind it, they weren't quite as solid. Carol Danvers believed that the inhuman Ulysses' visions of the future that might come to pass, and were somewhat unclear, should be acted on to protect humanity. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but okay. In other words, Civil War II was Minority Report. Iron Man, being down this road before, tried to talk Carol out of this madness, but after Rhodey died when a prediction of Ulysses's came true, there was basically no stopping her. Kind of odd as well, as though Carol and Rhodey are often a couple in the comics, and I do ship them together, Iron Man is definitely one of those that is closest to Rhodey, and even with Rhodey's death, Iron Man still thought that Ulysses' visions shouldn't be held in such high regard. So you'd really think that Carol might have, you know, being more open to listening to him. Carol fought against Iron Man and a line was drawn. A very weird line that didn't really make a ton of sense, but hey, Civil War II, everyone. It is what it is. It happened. Now we have to live with it. Number 1, Black Widow. Black Widow majorly betrayed Iron Man in the Ultimate Universe, and sure, it's not main continuity, but it's honestly, it's so bad, it needs to be acknowledged and mentioned, and that's why it took my top spot. In the Ultimate Universe, Black Widow was only posing as a hero, but was really, in secret, a villain the whole time, simply pretending to defect to get in with the heroes and then betray them and betray the United States. She was engaged to be married to Tony Stark and ended up breaking off the engagement when she revealed her true colors. She attempted to steal Tony's fortune and tragically killed his loyal butler and his friend Jarvis as well. So sad. In the end, Tony was able to stop Black Widow because he had given her a suit of armor as an engagement gift, but made sure to still have control of the nanites that were in her blood because of his terrible track record with women. Too bad he wasn't able to save Jarvis though, it's pretty sad. Black Widow would get hers in the end, but Tony would feel the pain of this betrayal for quite a while thereafter. Number 10, Spider-Woman. This betrayal is a little more subtle, but it definitely led to some trouble for both characters down the line, so I think it's an important one to mention still. Jessica Drew was in Madripoor with her friend Lindsay and Patch, aka Wolverine. She knew he was Wolverine, and he knew she knew at this point, I believe, but he still went by the alias of Patch because Logan thought he was being oh so sneaky, and he didn't want the world to know that the X-Men were actually alive at the time, even though I feel like anyone that met Patch probably knew it was Wolverine. Jessica had decided to take up a job as the Prince of Madripoor, Prince Baran's bodyguard, but Patch thought it was a bad idea because Baran was a bad guy. At the same time, Jessica was giving Patch grief for working his muscle and getting involved with Tiger, a powerful crime boss in Madripoor. Both felt the other was betraying their own sense of morals and thereby betraying their friendship, so it was kind of a two-way betrayal in these characters' eyes. In the end, Patch was right to criticize Prince Baran as Jessica ended up near death after stumbling upon the Lazarus Project during her shift in the palace and barely escaping with her life. Patch likewise would have a trial ahead as he wrestled with the mysterious Lazarus Project, but he'd forgive Jessica when he found her and help her to get to safety and get much needed medical attention. She was pretty messed up. Don't you hate when that happens? Don't you hate when you stumble upon mysterious projects and then you just get like thrown into a sewer because you're like in such a terrible condition? I know I do. Number 9. Gambit. In this case, Gambit wasn't entirely in control of himself. He was under the influence of the Shadow King, who had possessed him and made him fight against Logan. Wolverine happened to be the one to face off with him. He managed to get the drop on Gambit, defeating him in battle when Wolverine successfully pinned him down. This all happened too after Wolverine had been cut off from the rest of those X-Men who were not influenced by Shadow King, but as Wolverine said while Gambit was busy throwing insults his way, he is one of the best when it comes to winning fights. And regardless of being cut off from support, that is exactly what happened here. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to hear about more superheroes who have been betrayed, oh no, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Wolverine. Laura Kinney, formerly known as X-23, and Logan have quite the complex past. Laura is basically a genetic female counterpart to Wolverine. Some consider her a clone, and some consider her more a genetic offspring, kind of like Logan's daughter. In reality, she's kind of both, to be honest. When Logan first came across Laura, he realized that she had been brainwashed and wasn't in control of her actions. Able to sympathize, he did his best to free her. She was supposed to go straight to the X-Men basically, but decided to venture out on her own instead, which resulted in her getting in a fight again with Logan next time that he ran into her. However, he was able to not only defeat Laura this time, but also basically talk her down and bring her back with him to the Xavier Institute, helping her to find a home among the X-Men. And now the two are very close, and I don't think Laura would even consider fighting Logan again unless she had like absolutely no other choice, like if he turned evil or some such thing. But then honestly, she wouldn't be betraying him really because the Logan she knew would probably like want her to take him out. I feel like he's also the type of guy that's kind of like, you know, I've lived a long life, like I'm kind of fine, but I guess I gotta keep living, bub. Number 7. Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde didn't intend to betray Wolverine, it wasn't really her choice at all. She was brainwashed into doing it by Wolverine's longtime rival and old teacher, Ogun. Ogun was looking to get revenge on Wolverine, and so psychically uploaded a bunch of awesome ninja and martial arts skills to Kitty Pryde's mind, and then sent her to assassinate her mentor, friend, and fellow X-Men, Wolverine. Fortunately, the bond between Logan and Kate was so strong that they were able to work together to defeat Ogun in the end, freeing Kitty but leaving her with an experience which had changed her forever. She returned to X-Men a little more mature and definitely more of a badass. I think she still has all of that like assassin knowledge in her brain as well, taking up the new name for herself for a time at least of Shadowcat. Yeah, it was really more Ogun than Kitty betraying, but even if she was being controlled, it was still her own physical form fighting against Wolverine. And this is a cool story that I just enjoy revisiting, so I saw an opportunity to put it on this list and I was like, I'm gonna do it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Number 6. Mariko. Mariko Yoshida was one of the major loves of Wolverine's life. The two were even engaged to be married, but Mariko, being the good person that she was, wanted to make sure that her family no longer had any criminal ties before the wedding happened, as she was now the head of Clan Yoshida. Unfortunately, before they could get married, Mariko died during her attempt to broker peace between the rival criminal gangs. She ended up going to hell and would later meet Wolverine there when he was sent to hell by the Right Red Hand. Or at least his soul was sent there. His physical form was still on Earth, but it's a whole story. While his soul was there, his suffering would manifest in him being tormented by Mariko, his former love. She didn't want to torment Wolverine, but she pretty much had no choice. Despite this, Wolverine, when he escaped, came back and tried to free her, but Mariko believed she deserved what she got and chose to stay in hell, refusing to let him save her. I think she felt pretty bad because she was like, I feel like I betrayed you, and also I got stuff to atone for, you know? Number 5. Scarlet Witch. As much as I hate to include someone like Wanda on this list, it kinda has to be mentioned that she technically betrayed all of mutant kind with decimation and M-Day. Of course, I will still argue that this really only happened because Wanda's mental health was often shafted in her past, and so her kinda snapping after House of M made a whole lot of sense. While Wolverine was still Wolverine, there were a lot of mutants, and I mean a lot, that were affected. The whole community felt this blow, and Wolverine was part of that community, so even though he still had his powers, he was still hurting a lot, I think. I think a lot of mutants were. Also, he was one of the first people to realize what had happened in the House of M reality, and he was not too happy to have a fabricated life made for him and be denied the reality and history that were true to him, no matter how bleak or painful in comparison to the world Wanda had made for him and everyone in an effort to try to make herself, her family, and pretty much all other supers happy. I love how Wanda's like, I just want to give everyone a reality where like we can all be happy, you know? And everyone's like, how dare you? How dare you try to make me happy? Obviously, I feel very bad for Wanda, I think you can tell. Number 4. Professor X. Oh bub. Professor X for being the head of the Xavier Institute and for being a leader among his own X-Men team who claims to stand for mutant and human harmony and preaches about what it means to be good and be a hero and fight for all of humanity united, has a lot, and I mean a lot, of skeletons in his closet. He has betrayed the X-Men multiple times, Wolverine included. I think mainly this has to do with Professor X choosing to suppress as opposed to acknowledge and deal with his darker side. He put his team in danger when it was revealed that Danger Room was actually sentient and itself a living AI mutant who then pursued the team in an effort to get to Xavier. And also technically came equipped with knowledge on all their weaknesses, by the way. Danger Room is scary. Or just Danger, sorry. Just Danger, that's what the mutant version of Danger Room is called. Additionally, Xavier's repressed negative emotions and his severe punishment of Magneto was what led to the creation of the psychic entity known as Onslaught, which was sort of a blend between those two psyches. You could also argue that even in modern comics, Wolverine has felt betrayed by Professor X. When X chose to allow all mutant villains to come to Krakoa and call it their home, Wolverine was one of the few people to protest, thinking it was a bad idea that would inevitably backfire. I guess we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Although I feel like based on Inferno, Wolverine may have been right here. Number 3. Hulk. The Hulk has always been a rival of Wolverine's, despite the fact that both of them are heroes. In fact, Wolverine made his first appearance in Incredible Hulk issue 180, where he fought against him. Hulk has dropped in to fight Wolverine a few times in the comics, and sometimes does so just to prove that I guess he's the strongest between them. Although it doesn't always end that way. In fact, quite a few times their fights have actually ended more in a tie than anything. Some of Hulk's other personas, like Joe Fixit, have also gotten involved with Wolverine, and even when Fixit has meant well, there is an animosity between these two that generally leads to Fixit causing more trouble for Logan during their adventures. This is usually because they each have their own approach to dealing with problems and with baddies. Although, I guess, to be fair, it seems that the Hulk usually also feels betrayed, which is what leads to their fighting. But even the slightest thing can set him off, so these betrayals are usually just from some like small remark that Wolverine has made. So in the end, I always feel like Wolverine is more betrayed by the Hulk because he's just like said something offhand, and then the Hulk's like, now we have to fight. It's like, whoa. Breathe, it's okay. Number 2, Magneto. Sure, Magneto was a villain when this one happened, but he also joined up with the X-Men only to turn on them later, and vice versa. It's happened a lot. Magneto might, in general, be thought of as a villain because of his iconic classic appearances in the Fox X-Men films, as well as the X-Men 90s animated series and in the classic comics, but he's really more complex than just being a villain. In fact, currently in the comics, he's more of a hero, I'd say. However, that doesn't change his history with Wolverine, who is understandably a little less likely to trust, former villains turned heroes because of history like this. Magneto is the one responsible for ripping the adamantium right out of Wolverine's skeleton back in the day, which was insanely painful and left Wolverine in a more feral state for a good long period in the comics. He also lost his nose because of this, and this all went down after Magneto had been acting more heroically in the comics, working with the X-Men on behalf of Charles Xavier in his absence. In fact, Magneto was like the leader of the X-Men then, so if you want to be like, but he's a villain, he was definitely a hero and then he went back to being a villain. He felt like other people were betraying him. The tension between the two characters has remained ever since, and even shows up in the current X books, despite them both residing in harmony on Krakoa. Magneto only ranks a little lower here because he is so iconically a villain in many folks' minds still, but to me, he's a hero. Number 1. Cyclops. Cyclops has betrayed Wolverine multiple times in the comics. Probably one of the biggest betrayals happened either when the two couldn't agree and so created their own X-Men teams, separate from one another, each believing their view on young mutants and how to train and teach them was superior, or when Cyclops recruited Wolverine's female clone / genetic daughter onto the Black Ops mutant team X-Force against his wishes. Laura, aka X-23, aka now Wolverine, had just recently escaped those who saw her only as a weapon and a tool to be used, a deadly killing machine, which was exactly why Wolverine did not want her on the X-Force team. But Cyclops saw how useful she could be and felt that if she was willing to join, then it didn't really matter what Logan thought. Wolverine evidently disagreed with his outlook. He disagreed quite strongly.